Welcome. We are talking with social psychology graduate program postdoctorate fellow Curtis Puryear, who studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We were able to have a conversation with him over email. This was the study that he wrote, Bridging Political Divides by Correcting the Basic Morality Bias. And here's roughly what that study was about. Efforts to bridge political divides often focus on navigating complex and divisive issues. However, 9 studies suggest that we should also focus on a more basic moral divide. The erroneous belief that political opponents lack a fundamental sense of right and wrong. This basic morality bias is tied to political dehumanization and is revealed by multiple methods, including natural language analyses from a large Twitter corpus and a representative survey of Americans with incentives for accuracy. In the U.S., both Democrats and Republicans substantially overestimate the number of political outgroup members who approve of blatant wrongs. Importantly, the basic morality bias can be corrected with a brief, scalable intervention, providing information that just one political opponent condemns blatant wrongs increases the willingness to work with political opponents and substantially decreases political dehumanization. So he's saying, we're looking at the two political parties, and what we're seeing is that a lot of people in one party will think everybody in the other party is a monster who, so everybody who's a Democrat supports pedophilia rings. Everybody who's a Republican supported January 6th. Both of those are incorrect statements. But I have met many Democrats who felt every single Republican supports January 6th, and they love the coup, and they would do it if they could have got there. And I met many Republicans who think, all these Democrats are basically supporting pedophiles. So it's this, the other side has no morality, and all of them would do the most horrible things. As an example of political polarization. He's also saying part of the way to reduce that polarization is if you actually meet a Republican who goes, no, I thought January 6th was horrible. Or if you actually met a Democrat who says, no, I hate that this or that happened, that it might help soften your opinion. So that's what this study says. He's a postdoctorate fellow, basically a doctorate. I won't call him that because he hasn't achieved it yet, but basically a doctorate, basically an expert looking at political division and saying people have these horrible opinions of each other, and that's why we're so divided. So I asked him, has the basic morality bias, belief that the other side doesn't have morals at all, ever been this bad before in American history? I'd say almost definitely yes, but it's hard to gauge precisely because measures of public opinion are more spotty the further back in time you go. If we had data going back to the Civil War, I imagine the number of people who believed their political adversaries lacked basic moral values was pretty high then. Some of the data we do have, like feeling thermometers from the Ames, going back to 1968, does suggest partisan animosity is fairly unprecedented in the last 50 to 60 years. So, partisan animosity is fairly unprecedented in the last 50 to 60 years. I would wager the number of people who think people across the aisle lack basic moral values is also at its highest in the same period. So we have data showing that partisan animosity is the worst it's been in half a century. And he believes that, probably people who think the other side lacks basic morals is that the highest it's been in the same period. So the highest it's been in the last half century is now. People who believe the other side lacks basic morals, there is the largest number of people who believe that now than at any time in the last 50 to 60 years. That's what he's saying. But it's also important to think about how exactly what we are measuring and how beliefs and attitudes work. On the one hand, yes, we do find that Republicans commonly report things like Democrats think homicide is acceptable, and Democrats report the same thing about Republicans. That is alarming. But there's also research showing that if you really press people, if you go, okay, but deep down, do you really think that's true? Most people say it's not. So does that mean people are lying about their attitudes in our data? Not at all. It's just that when you ask people, do people across the aisle have basic moral values? Often what comes to mind first is all of the horrible things we see on social media and cable news that are designed to make us outraged at the other side. So again, this is Professor, and he's blaming the division on social media and mainstream media that's rewarding the behavior of extreme news and pushing division. So again, another person saying it's social media and media that, like these algorithms, are talking points or sound bites that are divisive for ratings, and they're making us more divided. Given how pervasive that content is on social media and media, I don't think it's at all that surprising that people are walking around thinking about how morally depraved the other side must be. But at the same time, there is hope, because people can quickly realize that the other side is not actually completely void of moral values when they stop to really think about it or have meaningful interactions with people on the other side. Or have meaningful interactions with people on the other side. Yes, but how many do? I suppose that, do you see any reason why the morality bias may decrease in the future naturally on its own? I suppose, but that depends on what is meant by naturally on its own. Do you think it could decrease without us intentionally trying to decrease it? Absolutely. At the same time, something about how we engage with politics is going to have to change. This could include changes to cable news and social media. See, if we fix cable news and we fix social media, that will cause the division to go away. So they don't constantly remind us of how depraved the other side must be. It could also include changes to our social interactions so that we have more meaningful and face-to-face interactions with people on the other side. That's not possible with the big sword. I've talked to that with other professors. If you go across the street and talk to your neighbor about politics, you're not really bridging the other divide, because everybody in your neighborhood already votes like you. You'd have to go to another region that doesn't vote like you. So there's some problems with just doing face-to-face interactions with people on the other side as a way of solution of reducing polarization. Some of those things could change. For example, there's increased talk about decentralizing social media, and content on the next big social media platform might not be so strongly shaped by pundits and media companies sowing division to drive engagement. See, if we just fix media and social media, it'll all calm down. In the meantime, we should be aware of our biases, how we misperceive people across the aisle, and how we can combat these misperceptions. So maybe it will end on its own. Do I think it could decrease without us intentionally doing something? Sure. He also doesn't say that it will. He says something has to change, and that something could be changing social media and media to be less polarizing. Are things worse now than when you wrote your report? Yes. Polarization is definitely worse. I don't know if it's worse than at any time in American history, but it's pretty bad. Additionally, we do have data showing that party animosity is the highest it's been in the last half decade. And he personally thinks that the number of Americans who think the other side is completely immoral is also the highest level we've had in the last half century. So that's the take from this professor. We'll leave it there. Interesting points based upon, this postdoctorate fellow. Interesting points. And we'll leave it there. Hope you enjoyed that information, and we'll come back with another one.